Serbian tennis player Novak Djokovic could now face further problems in Australia. It turns out he may have lied on the form he used to enter the country. It appears he met with a journalist despite knowing that he had COVID-19. Djokovic is the world #1 tennis player. He's due to play in the Australian Open, but he's not vaccinated against COVID-19. He was allowed to enter Australia on an exemption because he had had COVID very recently. Yusug Omar is the co-founder of #OurStories. He's in Australia. I don't know why, but he joins us now. Yusuf, good afternoon to you. How are people there seeing this issue? I mean, do Australians support their government against Novak Djokovic?
Australians are incredibly confused and they're incredibly divided on their response to this story. And they have every reason to be confused. Is it Novak or no vax? I mean, he's really causing quite a racket in many circles here in Australia. The views range from some people thinking that this is a big federal government political movement to come across as a strong government and to kind of gain political support. There's other people that think that we're bending the rules for a major celebrity and that, you know, Australia, for the most part, has been really strict around its border policy and has done a really good job of maintaining it. And that's why it's, for the most part, responded pretty well to COVID-19. I mean, where I am here in Queensland, we've had 11 deaths in the entire COVID-19 pandemic. And then you have another quite strong view, and that is specifically pertaining to the refugees and the asylum seekers. As I'm sure you know, and some of the viewers might know, when Novak was in this altercation with the Australian Immigration Office, he was put into a detention hotel. And Australia is really weird when it comes to people arriving, especially asylum seekers and whatnot. And they get put up in these detention center hotels. And Novak was kept in one of these for a little while, and his parents started tweeting that he was getting 2 meals a day and wasn't getting breakfast, and that he was in these terrible conditions. And a lot of Aussies are saying, wow, okay, cool. So Novak got out of this very quickly and is now likely to be able to play. But there are some people, asylum seekers and refugees, that have been kept in these conditions, in these hotel rooms for almost a decade. So you've got a range of opinions. And then, of course, you've got those that are celebrating his arrival. Those huge celebrations that took place in Melbourne with some communities.
Is this a political issue? I mean, are you seeing politicians saying different things, or all saying sort of the same thing?
So it's interesting. Like, Australia's policy has been really, really strict. Like, you can come into the country if you're vaccinated or if you've got a medical exemption not to be vaccinated. And it seems very clear that Novak hasn't disclosed his vaccination, but was let into the country. And we understand that the exemption was along the lines of the fact that he got COVID at some stage, so he was let in on that. But that seems to be isolated for Australian citizens. He then took the Australian government to court, won that bid, was allowed to contest his denial of his visa. It doesn't seem for the most part that people are taking this in a very political direction. I think for the most part, people are sensing that, like, are we bending or curving the rules for somebody who's got celebrity status or prominence?
Within all of this, and one of the reasons that Novak Djokovic is such a sort of hot-button issue, why there is so much attention, it's not just that he's world #1, it's not just that it's Australia, it's not just that it's Australia's policies, it's not just that it's the Australian Open, it's not just that Novak Djokovic does not believe in vaccinations for whichever reason, is that this is a sort of lightning rod issue around things around mandatory vaccinations. As I understand it, Australia has a pretty high vaccination rate. Are there big arguments about mandatory vaccinations there? We certainly see them here.
Yeah, definitely. So Australia approached this entire COVID-19 pandemic in a completely different way to the rest of the world, right? For most of the world, it was about how do we live with the virus? How do we contain it? Australia and New Zealand, for the most part, had an elimination policy. How do we eliminate the virus? And it was so severe that, like, in places like where I am here in Queensland, Australia, if we had one case of COVID-19, we would lock down 2 million people, the entire state, until we could deal with that case. And basically what they did was they got the vaccination rates up to 80, 90%, and then they let the virus in. They said, all right, let's do this. And that's proven really effective. We've seen a really low amount of deaths in the country. We've seen a really low amount of hospitalizations. Obviously, it took its toll, and it was only accessible to certain countries that could afford to do this for as long as they had. And South Africa and other countries were in very difficult and different situations. Having said that, there is a small minority of people, like every country in the world, that are choosing to be either vaccine hesitant or completely anti-vaxxer. In fact, a lot of the community that I gym with are part of this community that are not feeling comfortable taking the vaccine. I think what Australia has realized is if you can get up to that 80 or 90%, it still is safe to be able to open up your borders, start to have a normal life, and not see high levels of hospitalization taking place.
It's really interesting. I mean, the immigration minister there, I think his name is Alex Hawke, he has the final say over this. He could still, even, literally just as the first ball's about to be smacked in the Australian Open, sort of have Djokovic deported. Do you think he'll do it? I mean, it will make a big political show for him.
Yeah, I think it's difficult for me to speculate or to say at this stage. I think given that he's in the country and they're so close to it, I don't see that happening personally. But, anything can happen. Australia have been known to be incredibly strict with their immigration policies. You'll remember when Johnny Depp, the celebrity, brought his dog into the country without permission. They had to leave the country rapidly. There's been a lot of sort of response on Twitter and on social media looking back at those kinds of instances. So Australia is incredibly strong on their border policies, but I don't think they would do that. But again, I can't say.
Yusug Omar, thanks very much indeed. Co-founder of #OurStories. Do appreciate the time. Fascinating to see what's going to happen around Novak Djokovic. As I say, it's one of those hot button issues. Gets so many issues all in one place.